You are listening to Women's Running Stories, where exceptional women runners share inspirational stories about their running experiences.
The fact that I'm telling myself, you can throw it down. You've done this before. Having those proofs to essentially back all of your efforts when you go into a scary situation or hurdle and you tell yourself, I've done this and I can do it again and I can bring it. So it's almost like you have ammunition to fight against your those voices that telling you maybe you can't and maybe you shouldn't, or even when you might be on social media and you're comparing yourself and then these assumptions start to come up of this person's so much faster and this person's doing this better than me, and like who said that? Everybody has their own journey, and I think that when you go back to what I've done when the pressure was on or when it didn't seem like the odds were stacked in my favor and I pushed through, that is my favorite thing to rely on. And I think that that's what's definitely gotten me through those intense seasons of imposter syndrome where I'm wondering if it's even worth continuing in the sport. And I have to have these really good talks, and I write in my journal and I just write down what I have accomplished, because I think it's so important to actually look back at what you've done and to see how you show up on the line and how you commit to seeing it through is so key to actually fulfilling your potential. Hi, my name is Micha Powell. I am a 400 meter Team Canada Olympian, and I'm a New Balance athlete as well. And I'm from Montreal, so my first language is French, and I currently train in Toronto, Canada.
Yes, this episode features professional 400-meter runner and now author Micha Powell. Just this summer, Micha published her first book, Sprinting Through Setbacks, an Olympian's Guide to Overcoming Self-Doubt and Imposture Syndrome. And in this episode, Micha is going to get into some of the most transformative racing moments in her running career to date. But before you hear more from Micha, I want to welcome you to Women's Running Stories. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am the host and producer of this podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I always appreciate you listening. So something to know about me is that I love competition. I love watching competitions. I love the whole process of being competitive. There are endless numbers of lessons to learn from putting your all into a performance. There are lessons to be learned in the preparation, in the actual performance itself, and in the outcome, in processing how it all went down. And these are lessons and experiences that I've found I apply all the time in my life outside of competition. And this is one of the reasons I really enjoyed Micha's book. The format is a collection of stories, each one focused on a race event that taught Micha an important lesson. And at the end of each chapter, there is a journaling section with journaling prompts related to what Micha highlighted in the chapter. So there's an interactive personal growth element to her book as well. It doubles as a workbook. For this episode, keeping with the theme of her book, Micha is going to highlight some of those pivotal races. A few things to know about Micha Powell. She is an Olympian. She was a member of the Canadian 4x400 meter relay team at the 2016 Olympics. And she was a member of the gold medal winning 4x400 team at the 2022 Commonwealth Games. And that team included, in addition to Micha, Kyra Constantine, Ayana Stavern, and Natasha McDonald. Also, Micha is the daughter of track and field superstars and multi-time Olympians. Her father is long jumper Micha Powell, who set the world record in that event in 1991. That record still stands today. And her mother is Rosie Edda, a 3-time Olympian in the 400-meter hurdles. Recently, Micha made a coaching change, and her mother is now her coach. For just a little bit of clarity here, too, you'll hear Micha mention numbers, 54s, 51s, 50s. She's talking about race times in seconds. All right, now let's get to it. Let's hear Micha's running story, beginning at the beginning, with Micha talking about the event she runs and how she got into it. Here to tell her story is Micha Powell.
I run the 400 meters, which I've been told a lot of times is crazy. People always kind of give me that grimace when I tell them the event. They're like, ooh, okay, that's a tough one. I'm like, yeah, I know, I do it. But I think the reason why people kind of wince a bit when I say that distance is because it's not quite an all-out sprint. However, you are in the mindset of like, I'm going to sprint this as long as I can until I can't anymore. And then you keep a pace. And people say it's pretty much the way to win a 400 is the person that slows down the least. So with all that being said, I started off my track career relatively late at around 17, and I did cross country. So I do have a really good set of lungs. I think that's something that my coaches have always said, like I have very high capacity for like long distance running. However, the 400 appealed to me the most because it was just one lap. I actually did something called a VO2 max test, and they wanted just to see, how efficient my body could be in it, just like how it handled running for long distances. And they said, you know what, you should do the 8. And I told them this was my first year at college. I said, don't tell my coach that, because I wanted to go specifically for the 400 since it just felt right to me. Like it was, my finish was my strength. And I did love the speed element. I knew I could get better at it. My legs were so long, so I knew I just needed a little bit more on the technical side. But it was just this really great marriage of me being really hard worker. So I like the challenge of something longer, but also I love the thrill of something shorter. So the 400 is definitely one of those events where I don't think it gets the love it deserves because it is so grueling and it's not quite 100. So people, I guess, aren't sure what a good time is. But I think that everyone's done in high school and can definitely attest to how it's about being like mentally strong. And I think that's my favorite thing about the 4 is that it can be really frustrating when you don't execute well, because you kind of can see in real time that you're not hitting the marks. But when you do execute well, it's so satisfying because you go through that, 300 meter mark in 37, 36, and you're like, okay, this is going to be a fast time. So for me, it's like, it's a bit of a mixed bag when you approach this event. And I feel like that's who I am. Like, I'm not quite a short sprinter, but I'm not quite a long distance runner. And, both my parents are Olympians, but I feel like I'm a little bit of a late bloomer.
Micha may have come to track and field later than many other competitive runners, but once she was in, with her eyes firmly fixed on racing the 400. For her collegiate career, Micha chose the University of Maryland. Maryland is an NCAA Division I or D1 school in track and field. D1 being the most competitive level of racing in the U.S. collegiate system. Within D1, the University of Maryland's track program is on the smaller side. It is not one of the big powerhouse teams that people expect to be really competitive on the national scene. And this made it a great place for Micha to develop. During her time there, Micha made steady progress, becoming one of the best runners to ever compete for the University of Maryland. Among other accomplishments, she set, and she still holds, both the indoor and outdoor 400-meter record for the school. Micha's abilities shone particularly bright in 2016 when she was vying for a spot on the team that would go to the biggest event of the year, the NCAA Outdoor Track and Field Championships, which that year were taking place in Eugene, Oregon. And the championships are where they run the semifinal and the final events to determine the national champions. But to get to Eugene, Micha first needed to get through the regional competition.
I just remember getting to the track. This was East Regionals Conference Championships. So for people who haven't been in the NCAA system, this is essentially the quarterfinals of the U.S. college championships. So if you make this, you're going to the semis, and that's like, you're going to have eyes on you. So For context, I went to Maryland on a partial scholarship. I wanted to initially go to different schools, but they just didn't see me as a fit because I wasn't as fast as some of their other recruits. And I did start really late. They had people that they were looking at from the time that they were, you know, 16, and I just started when I was 17, 18. So I was running 55 going into Maryland, and then I had a really, really nice progression from my freshman year, running 55, then to 54, and then 53 my second year, and then 51, which was a really big, I want to say, like, level up. So when I went to the East Regional Championships, I was in the rankings, I was in the mix, but there, by no means was I the one that people were like talking about or looking out for, because I was coming from like a relatively smaller track program. So the southern schools are usually the ones that people look at throughout the whole year. So I go in and I made like I said, the quarterfinals. So this is the final round until you go to the semis in Eugene in Oregon for NCAA finals. And I remember getting there, and it was raining and it was about to storm. And I ran 52, I want to say maybe 6 the day before to get into the quarters. So I was going in confident, but at the same time, I was maybe 16th. And you need to be top, I want to say 12. Yeah, you need to be top 12 to make it to the NCAAs, because they take 12 from each conferences, East and West. So I was 16th. And I remember my coach he was really great that day, because he didn't put any additional pressure on me, but he was very like adamant about me being able to do it, to get to that next round. So hearing those words from him, and he was just very like receptive to me. Like, I would do my warm up and he'd let me do a run, and then he'd just say something like, "That was good," like very, very just matter of fact, quick, done. And I love that. And I remember, I was looking around and I was like, wow, okay, you have some of the best girls in this, but you're here too. So I just had like these kind of nice positive reinforcement that would come up. But then when I get to the check-in, they usually have you there 20 minutes before. My coach and I like to go into the check-in at the last call. And I go in and this lady goes, "You know how I know it's you?" And I'm like, "How?" She's like, "'Cause you're last." And I remember being like, "Why would you say that?" But then I quickly kind of like went, "Wait, you just had a great warm up. Your coach believes in you. You believe in yourself. Yes, this is scary, but you're about to go do what you need to do in like 20 minutes." So I remember I went right back to, okay, that was not ideal to hear that, because you could interpret it as so many different ways, but I just zoned right back into, I had a great warm up, and I was like, you're going to go out there and you're going to just fly. So the rain came, the ground is soaked, and I'm just focused. And I'll never forget that race, because I came out of lane 8, which is like, you're pretty much blind. You only have one person on the outside of you in that case, because it's a 9-lane track. So when I passed the girl in lane 9, I already knew. I said, "Oh, you're getting out." And that's one of the things I was working on the whole time, and still am, on my initial push, because a lot of times I rely on my finish. So the fact that I got out so strongly was a great sign. So I passed lane 9. And I remember I could hear my feet, because the ground was wet. So I would just hear this fast patter. It was almost like I was telling myself, "Whoa, like, you're going really quick. I can hear it." It's like, you can just tell your cadence is right. And I was running. And then I remember coming around the corner, and I was still in the lead. And at this point, this is really shocking for me, because again, I was going in ranked 16th. So to be top 12, I knew it was possible, but I would have to run really well. And here I am, I can't see anyone. I'm like, I'm leading, okay, 300 meters in the race. And then I saw from the corner of my eye lane 2. So we're very far apart. So it's my peripheral. And I was like, and I started to get tight, but I was like, okay. And I said this in my head, I said, your mom didn't get her ticket to Oregon for no reason. So I knew she already had that belief in me that I was going to make the team. And she bought herself a ticket for the next round. And I said, your mom didn't buy a ticket to Oregon for nothing. And I kept pumping my arms, and I crossed the line, and I ran 51.9, and it was my first 51, because at that point I was running 52s, which was already really great because I had the school record established. But I was just so proud of myself that I did something so big, despite, there was a big storm, the lady saying, "I know it's you because you're last," and I could have taken that anyway. And also knowing that my competition was very high. And I just remember crossing that line, and I was so happy, but also I remember so stiff. Like my legs felt like I've never run that fast before. And I remember my coach just said, keep walking, keep walking. I kept walking and I was like, my legs had lactic, my mouth had lactic, but I kept walking and I was like, I did it. I did that. And with that race, I also got the Olympic standard. And it was just a really great feeling for me because it showed that someone who started track so late could really make a big, big impact. And my record still stands. And it's a race that I think about all the time because it just was like I had no reservations. I just went for it. I didn't, have all these worries. I wasn't thinking about who was doing this and who was going to think this. It was just, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to show them. I'm going to show everybody in the stands that like I'm a contender. And yeah, that was absolutely my favorite, one of my favorite races of my career.
With that terrific race at the East Regional Championships, Micha punched her ticket for nationals, and she bettered the outdoor 400-meter record for her school, which she already held. In addition, that performance ranked her as the second fastest Canadian in her event that year, and she met the Olympic standard. The Olympic standard is the time an athlete has to run to be able to compete in the Olympics in their event. And with that, Micha was named to the 2016 Canadian Olympic team for the 4x400-meter event. An incredible achievement. This would prove, however, to be a bit of a mixed blessing, one that wasn't fully resolved until the 2022 Commonwealth Games. And it all started with Team Canada at the 2016 Olympics getting prepared to race the 4x400 finals.
I was on the 4x4 team and I was one of the youngest people on the team at 21. And we were at the 4x4 warm up. And I remember this girl, she just got pretty banged up from her 400 hurdle race. And she said, hey, Micha, I think that you should get ready to race. I should get ready to take her position. And I was so excited because already I was like, this is my chance. I'm going to run in the finals because I was, second fastest in Canada at before nationals, and I know that they're going to utilize that. And then I remember we're huddled up. There's about 7 of us, and they go, "Okay, here's the order," and they don't say my name, and I was so devastated because I had to kind of put on a brave face, or at least I felt like I did. And then I went up into the stands and cheered on my teammates. But I remember just feeling like, man, I really wanted to be on that track and race for my country. And one of my biggest triggers then was I never good enough, to actually run? And so that kind of started the whole mindset of I don't know if I'm actually fast or talented enough. And so the imposter syndrome started to kick in because I felt like I was not quite ready to run at the highest stage, but it wasn't my choice, right? It was the decision of the team head coach, which I think at the time made sense because he was going off of who was more seasoned at that level. And so I was definitely pretty sad going back home because I knew a lot of my friends had viewing parties. And so fast forward to Commonwealth Games, and at that point I was running well, but still hadn't had a 51-second breakthrough yet since my 2016 race. So I remember they asked me to go to Commonwealth Games and represent Canada. I was like, of course, I'd love to. And it was on a whim. They asked me a couple days before the meet, I think 2 days before we left for Commonwealth Games. I wasn't even on that roster. And they said, hey, do you want to come and join Represent Canada? Because one of the girls was hurt. And I jumped to it. And same thing, they had 5 of us at the warm-up area telling us which order they're going to have us. And as you can only run 4 girls. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I really hope they pick me, but I don't know. I almost have to protect myself so I don't get my hopes up. And they said my name. They said my name 3rd, and I had never run 3rd before. I was so used to running 4th at Maryland and starting for Team Canada at other races. So when he said my name and he said I'm running 3rd, I remember just everything just clicked. It said, you're going to do great. You're going to hand that baton off so well to Kyra. And I could feel the imposter syndrome just going away because my belief in myself and the way I seize the opportunity of, okay, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to make sure that they know they've made the right decision. And I just remember doing handoffs with Ayana, and it felt really good. And I was like, I was energized, and went out there and got the baton from Ayana, and I bolted out of there. And I remember I ran 51.5, and I was so happy because it felt so easy. So I wasn't sure what my split was, but they told us later that night. And I got text messages, from Kyra. And she's like, oh, that's so great, because everybody knows like that you want to contribute the best time that you can to a relay. So glad that I could show what I'm actually capable of, and that I have 51s in my legs when you give me the opportunity to do so. So that race really shed a lot of doubt that I was holding on to before then, because it felt like I wasn't progressing in the way that I should be, even though my 200-meter times were getting so fast, but the 400s felt pretty stagnant. And that race for me was such a great reminder of like, when you just give yourself a fair chance, and you're on your team, you're on your side, you really it's like I was able to tap back into that Micha who just goes, hey, I'm going out there to have some fun and go for it. And so that's what happened. And since that race, I always tell myself that you have it in you. You just have to be in the right mindset, and then in the right, have the right opportunities that allows you to showcase that. So yeah, that was a really great way for my mind to shift and say, look, they're taking a chance on you. Let's go out there and prove them right. And then since then, I've made world championships again, and despite injuries, have had 200-meter PBs and some really good 400-meter times. But at the same time, I know it's going to take me to train at a very high capacity to get myself to 50-point times, because that's what's needed now. But I'm really ready for that challenge, because I think ever since 2022, it's given me that, it's just given me a lot more strength to pursue something so big, since I did do that at Commonwealth Games.
Throughout her racing career, Micha has had those big moments. She's learned that when given the opportunity, she will rise to the occasion and perform at her best. Like at the Commonwealth Games, where she ran that terrific leg as part of the gold medal winning team. And big race successes come with great opportunities to learn and grow. That success at the Commonwealth Games helped Micha overcome that lingering imposter syndrome that had taken root so many years earlier at the Olympics, when she wasn't chosen to race in the finals as part of that relay team. And performing well, racing at her best, this is in fact Micha's job as a professional athlete. But so is knowing her limits and having the confidence to speak up when something doesn't feel right. That is, it's important to understand when it's best to not go to work, as it were, which is always a tough call for athletes. And this was a decision Micha was faced with about 9 months after the 2022 Commonwealth Games. It happened at a meet that was meant to get Micha ready for the 2023 Canadian National Championships, which also served as team selection for the World Championships. Micha was coming back from a hamstring injury, and things were not looking good.
I was crying. I was in pain. I could barely finish my warm-up because I wanted to race so badly, because I thought that that's what my coach wanted, until I finally just went, okay, this is too much. I'm not even running in enjoyment anymore. And it's not just about that. Obviously, when you get to a certain level, there's going to be some races that you're just really, really nervous about, and that's totally normal. But this was different. I was in pain, and I felt like I had to run just so people weren't mad at me. And I could tell, no, that's not a good place to come from when it comes to approaching a performance. So I just could tell my hamstring was not happy. And you could argue, okay, it was also the emotional stress of the Olympics or the World Championship trials were a few weeks away. But I needed to step away. And so I made the call, had a good cry, and I called my chiropractor on the phone right after. And he said, Misha, I think you just made a great decision, because I had just come off of my hamstring tear back in April, and it was healing, but because I was still trying to race on it, there was some scar tissue buildup, and I think that it just kind of got inflamed and reignited a little bit at that warm up. And so my coach, my chiropractor rather, was really glad that I took that stand, and I said, no, I'm not racing. And I know that, my coach at the time probably had a lot of mixed feelings about it, because as a coach, you want your athlete to run, but then, you don't want to risk something going bad. But I was glad that I made that call, because I think a lot of athletes, like, we're always reminded, like, we're so strong, we're warriors, we have these incredible attributes, but we are, at the same time, I think we have to remember and be tuned into our bodies. So I called my coach, or my chiropractor, and he said, really great call. I'm going to see you, tomorrow. And we worked on it for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And I remember just focusing on, well, I've got to heal. I can't run at Canadian trials if I'm limping. And we worked on it, and I got such intense treatment. I was really grateful for that, because I just knew that my chiropractor, this is someone I've seen for a while, knew what I was going through, and he was going to heal me. And I believe I didn't put on spikes until like right before nationals, but that was a good call, because we had to really take a pause on straining the muscle. And so I've just focused on my strength, so doing really light weights but explosive, so you're mimicking what you're going to do on the track. And I took a step back from going to training, because it was so touch and go. I would go to practice and I would be able to do half of the workout, but then I'd have to stop. So it was just about giving myself that pause and the best chance of racing well at nationals. And it worked out. I ended up coming fourth at nationals that year in the 400 and in the 200. And I think it was a result of me saying, no, I'm not going to race, just 3 weeks prior to that at the meet in Windsor. And it's tough at the time, because you feel like, oh, everyone's going to know that I didn't run because my name was there. Da, da, da. But if you can get out of those thinking, like assuming what everyone's going to say, and just focus on what you need to do, which the big picture is, I need to make the world championship team. And I did. And I believe it's because I made that hard choice that made sense for my body. And I'm glad I had that support to call someone and them say right away, you did a great call. And my partner, David, as well, talking to him whenever I go through injuries is really key, because he's a part of my support system. We live together. So having someone know how you're capable of so much, and reminding you of that is, I think, really, really key. Because if you are injured and you're sitting around maybe just scrolling all day, looking at what everyone else is doing, it's easy to start to count yourself out or think of why me's. But I think of how to make my time resting more productive. And I'll maybe even watch some of my old races, or I will just do something that's not track related, to be honest, and then have a healthy balance of, I know track is, one of my identities, but it's not the only thing that I bring value to in the world. So just having more of that perspective of, okay, I made a tough call, but I think this is going to really benefit me in the long term.
Micha has developed the confidence and the support system she needs to make good choices for herself in this high-pressure world of racing. She's also learned how to pull it together even when circumstances are less than ideal. Like during a trip to Italy last year in 2023, where Micha went to finish off her season.
I got terrible food poisoning, and it was so bad that I literally remember just like having water and bread the day leading up to one of my races. And I was so weak. And I remember just thinking, like, what is this? Like, what is the universe trying to tell me something? Should I just stop running track? Because this is not a fun way to start my Italian tour. So I ran, and it was so bad. I ran, like, I don't know, 54. And I remember starting off running fine, but then my stomach was like gurgling, and I was starting to just think about like, I don't really want to keep running right now. But I finished, and my mom knew the situation. So she was like, okay, well, good for you for even getting up on the line, but like, yeah, you got to get your stomach lining back. So we went to the next meet, still in Italy, just like maybe a couple hour drive away. And I remember it was like, cliffside. And yeah, when it comes to feeling like, well, this is incredible. Like, I'm racing in Italy. Yes, my first race, I had food poisoning, but the fact that I'm able to travel and go to these incredible places is within itself, it's an incredible privilege. So we get to the second meet, and I was getting a little frustrated. I was like, oh my gosh, like, I just want to have fun. I want to love what I do again. And my mom goes, well, do you want to stop? Like, it's okay. You don't have to race. I think my race was in 2 days. And I was like, no. I thought about it. I was like, no, I want to race. And I remember my mom and I went for a walk. And the thing about Italy is that I love putting on like nice blazer, like white. No, like it was a white, I remember, chemise and these really cute like jean, I guess capri pants, and my hair is up. And I remember we were going for a walk, and it was just so fun to put on something that wasn't track gear for a bit. And we went for a walk, and we connected with nature. And it was just so beautiful. We're in Rovereto, and it's just like the most beautiful sunsets. And we did that, like I said, 2 days before my race. And I remember feeling already a lot better because I was able to just kind of get out of my hotel room. Because something that people might not know is that when you're on the road traveling as a professional athlete, like, you don't see much. You just kind of go to your track, the track, you get bus there, and you get bus back to the hotel, and that's really it. And then you eat the same food. So it was really good that my mom and I went out of the hotel and just took a walk, because I love exploring. I love, I also know Italian, so it was really easy for me to get around. And yeah, it was really fun to go shopping and just getting some really nice stuff that would remind me, like, again, that there's life outside of just your 50-second race. And yeah, it was a really nice experience to have gotten out of my head. And then that race, 2 days later, I remember it was a night race. Everybody was there, and I was doing my warm up. And I remember just enjoying myself more. And it was so fun because I was so relaxed and in a mindset where I was like, I'm gonna have some fun out there. I'm gonna do well, even though I just had food poisoning, 4 days ago. And so I remember racing that race, and I finished with the season's best. And I had a glimpse of like, wow, when I'm just me, when I'm doing stuff that is in addition to running and getting out of my head and not just sitting and stressing over what I could have done and looking towards the future, it's just such a great place for me to be competing at. So I'm really glad that my mom and I were able to experience such a high with that race, but also we overcame the low of me getting food poisoning. And if there's ever those, you just feel like you're like, man, what? I think I'm just getting dealt the worst cards right now. It's almost like you have to laugh at it and just go, okay, I'm going to put on, whatever that looks like for you. But like, for me, it was like a nice white blouse and some jeans, and just do something that has nothing to do with what I've been putting on my energy in. And I think that gave me a nice reset. And I got to connect with nature again. Like like I said, we went for a walk in the cliff sides, and I just had such a great race because I think I got to get out of that fog. And it was really great to just be somewhere that I felt like I've grown a lot as a person, and I can, bounce back in whatever situation. And for me, it was a really great meet to finish off last year.
Micha had a solid finish to her 2023 season, despite that bout with food poisoning. And looking ahead to 2024, the focus was making the team going to Paris. Injuries hampered Micha's training, however, and while she was able to compete at the Canadian Olympic trials, she did not make the Olympic team. It was, no doubt, disappointing. But this is part of the athlete life too, coping with injury. And Micha has used this time to develop strategies to cope well and come out the other side stronger and more motivated than ever.
So for me, funnily enough, it was just watching videos that took me out of this bubble of, track is everything. And also on social media, you're following, let's be honest, the top people in the world. And it's easy to feel like, well, I'm not top 30 in the world, so what am I? But it's such a small niche. Like, I'm following people who are the best of the best of the best. And I'm still in that tiny percentage of people who can say they, competed in at international level meets. And so I think for me, it was making my world a bit bigger. So I wouldn't go on social media as much. It's not that I would just completely take that out of my life, because I do find inspiration going there, but I stopped going on as much because I felt like I could tell I was comparing and putting so much more pressure on myself, that if I remember just thinking, well, if I wasn't online looking at what other people are doing and looking at other people's results, I'd probably be a little bit happier, because I'm smart enough to know what it takes to get to the next level. That's not going to change. The standard is what it is. So why do I need to look at or have my feed remind me all the time of what other people are doing? So that was a good start, not going online and comparing as much, and definitely not tracking what other people have been running in my event, because that's not going to help me. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to do what I need to do when I'm healthy. So that was a big one. And then watching YouTube videos that had really great insight as to, like your psychology and when you're going through tough times. And again, just really focusing on like, what are the things that are going through my mind? Why are these things, why do I think these things are true, and breaking that down. So journaling for me is really big. And I noticed just keeping it simple and being like, okay, did I have like a green, yellow, or red day? And like a green day is like, okay, I felt really good. Like I was uplifting. I felt like confident about things I was going to do. Or was today more of a yellow? Like, did I feel like I was constantly worried about my choices? And a lot of times it'll go back to just like, what am I telling myself? What am I watching? So scaling things back, taking things off my plate is big. So I will try not to just overload my calendar just for the sake of feeling busy because I'm not training, and instead thinking of, look, it's not like because you're not training, you're not doing anything. So getting rid of those really strange assumptions and things that I would see as, as productive, and say, wait a minute, why do I think that that's productive, as opposed to resting and healing myself? And something I actually loved doing when I was on my way out of my injury, but wasn't quite hitting the times I needed, was I literally went to go play badminton with my boyfriend. He was like, do you want to play badminton? I was like, what? I'm like, I haven't played this in so long, but it just gave me an escape and an outlet to be competitive in something that I'm not that good at, but it was so fun. And the reason why I said, again, I was on my way back to health is because I wasn't I didn't just get injured. Like, I wouldn't suggest doing a sport where you just got injured to change it up, but I was needing something different to put my energy in something else. Yeah, it was one of those reminders that if your world is really, really, really rigid, I think that it does give you, I think for me at least, I'll speak on just in my experience, it just does me a disservice, because I equate my success so much with track and winning and running fast, that if I do anything but, I start to think, okay, maybe I'm not doing this right. And that can just turn things into such black and white measures. And I don't like that in my life. I think that now that I'm older, I'm able to see the nuances and see that I run better when I'm relaxed. And definitely surround yourself with people who aren't going to just see you as, you're good at track, so I will spend time with you and invest in you. And if you're not, then bye. Because that's also really easy to kind of equate yourself with, I'm running well, people like me. I'm not running well, people don't like me. Like that I think it leads into some really murky territory. And I'm so lucky to have family that even if I did make the team this year, like, you know what I mean? It's not like because I didn't make the Olympic team, they don't care about me. It's just everyone has their own life. And when I run well, they're so happy. But when I don't, they're like, that's fine, because they've seen my progress and they've seen how I've grown as a person. And I think ultimately that's my biggest tell from my track career is I've grown a lot more as a person. And I think that I've seen myself grow in more ways than just my speed. And I'm really excited about the next 4 years because I definitely want to keep running for another Olympic cycle. And now experiencing, I think, one of the toughest years of my career so far, and noticing that, hey, I'm still here and I have a lot more to give is, I think already it's like ammunition, the only ammunition I need, because I know that I can do so much when I'm given the right opportunities and the right environment. Yeah.
Micha is poised and ready to take on this next Olympic cycle, bringing with her an appreciation for the wealth of experience she's gained since she started out at age 17.
I think back to Micha that just started track at 17 and who was so concerned with what other people were thinking and saying and being liked. And, I was definitely observing a lot more and kind of looking at what's she doing? What are they doing? And then now being 29 and being in the sport for over a decade, I'm like, wow, yeah, you can definitely be inspired by others, but at the end of the day, it's so much better to, I find, pave your own road to success and to have, I think, that inner sense that that strength from within and not look too much to other people to give you that. When I was injured last year and there were so many things going on in my life, it just was you know what? This year, just for whatever reason, the Olympics, just the timing wasn't right. But I know without a doubt that now with my mom being my coach, with me being in, I think, a more just a more challenging environment, having people who can push me again, because I lost my training partner in 2021 because she retired. She was amazing. So for those 3 years, I felt very I didn't really know where I was getting that push from. And it's good because I'm lucky. I didn't go through some big traumatic thing with my old training environment. It was just that it wasn't what I felt like I could be my best version of myself in. And I think a lot of girls can relate to that. Just make sure you're in a space that you feel like you can be the biggest version of yourself and you don't feel like you need to be smaller. It's not worth being in an environment if you don't feel seen. I think it's really important to be in a space that you feel like you can grow the most. So now going into this year, knowing my strengths, knowing what needs to be done, and that's obviously running 50 point in the next 4 years, but also having more balances and I think more resources that I can pull from my own experiences. I feel like I'm a better athlete because of it. And it's so strange to say because, a lot of my fastest times are from quite a ways back now with my 2022 4x4 performance. But I think that it's for me to remind myself that I think the limits come from within, and if I can just keep going in this place of you're really resilient and you've got so much talent that you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you stop. So yeah, I think I'm more sure than ever that I'm going to make these next 4 years as enjoyable, but also as focused as possible. So I think there's just this more of this maturity that I'm going into these next 4 years. And yeah, being, I think, an underdog also helps because people kind of write you off when you're not, 21, 22, and you're not dropping crazy times. And that's, I think, for me, a superpower because that's fine. That's fine if you're not looking at me as intently as the latest 16-year-old phenom, because I've never been really looked at like that. I've always been looked at as, oh yeah, that's Micha, that's Rosietta's daughter and Mike Powell's daughter, but never really as me. So I think the next 4 years is about having the next 4 years of my career be my 4 years with my intention and with my full efforts under a really good training environment and great coaching. And I think the biggest thing is noticing that I've had an impact on young athletes, especially young girls, because now with social media, they'll reach out to me and they'll say like these things have resonated with them or these things connect with them. And I remember when I was in college, like I didn't have someone to confide in. I felt like everything was very cutthroat, and if I admitted any mistakes, that it was going to be used against me. And I think that it's really cool to be that person that I wish I had, to talk to while I was figuring things out in my sport. And I'm really grateful to be that to so many young kids. And I think that my personality is, I think, more refined now. Like I'm not as much of a people pleaser, but I do like to make sure that people around me are able to be their best selves. So yeah, I think it's just, I'm noticing that I've gotten more attuned to who I am, and I think I can use that to my advantage the next 4 years.
I am really looking forward to what comes next for Micha Powell in racing, in book writing, and whatever else she focuses her incredible energy and talents on. That does bring us to the end of Micha Powell's story on the podcast. Thank you so much, Micha, for coming on the podcast and sharing your story, and also for writing a book that is both inspirational and interactive. So, yeah, thank you. I also want to thank Molly Herford of Strong Girl Publishing for putting me in touch with Micha. Strong Girl Publishing is the publishing house that put out Micha's book. Now, I know you, like me, are going to want to keep up with Micha, so please look to the show notes and I will provide links to how you can do that. There, I will also provide a link to Strong Girl Publishing, where you can purchase Micha's book, Sprinting Through Setbacks, an Olympian's Guide to Overcoming Self-Doubt and Imposture Syndrome. And that does bring me to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for being here. I always appreciate you listening, and I appreciate you sharing the podcast. I would love it if you shared women's running stories with someone else you know would enjoy these stories too. That's going to do it for me. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am the host and producer of Women's Running Stories. And until next Tuesday, I do wish you joyful, inspired strides forward. Women's Running. Women's Running Stories.
Hear Her Sports is a podcast for everyone who loves stories by and about women striving to improve and make a difference in their lives. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery, a former professional cyclist. In every episode, I introduce a female athlete or woman in the business of sport through a thoughtful conversation about who they are and the terrific work they're doing. My guests and I explore the glorious and frustrating issues in sports, history, equity, training, nutrition, and so much more. Join us for inspiration, for community, and for love of being a strong, athletic woman.